you can create some really interesting effects by starting with the basic premise for bridging popcorns and adding some short rowing or other techniques. For example, the seashell border that I showed in both of the first two books, Hand Manipulated Stitches and More Hand Manipulated, is a really good example of this and a springboard for other techniques beyond. So I'm going to hold all the needles to the left of needles 1 and 2, left of 0 in this case, because of the way I'm going to alternate the effect. So I'll knit one row across and then hold the bridge on the right. And then I'm going to return one needle to upper work every row until I have 7 needles in working position. And I'm going to add my little partial weight here in the middle, just so I don't have to fuss with it. And when you've got 7 needles in working position, then you can start returning them to hold. But keep in mind that I've chosen 7 for the size here, but you could really use fewer or more needles just as easily. And when I get back to just 2 needles, I'll return the bridge at the left to upper work position and knit one row to the left. And before I go any further, I'm going to pick up the edge stitch from the first row and hang it on the needle directly above. And then I'm going to knit 4 more rows across all the needles. Make sure everything knitted clean. And I'm going to begin this next repeat from the left side of the bed. So I'm going to leave the first 2 needles right of 0 in working position and hold everything else. Knit one row across and hold the bridge at the left. So I've now got 2 needles working here. And every row I'm going to return 1 needle until I've got 7 stitches or 7 needles working again. And then I will start holding them 1 every row. And then bridge my way out to the right and pick up that first row again, or as close as you can get to it. So there are the little seashell shapes. 4 rows between each one with the edge picked up. I didn't bother with any wrapping when I did the short rowing, and with this particular yarn, it's showing up quite a bit right now where those gaps are, but I think that once the fabric is washed, most of that is going to close up over itself, which is always a good reason for doing a swatch before you try something on a garment. By comparison, this swatch has been washed. You can't see any of the short row gaps, and the seashells stand up beautifully from the surface. The only difference between those seashells and this ruffle is the fact that for the seashells there are 4 rows between each repeat, and on the ruffle there are only 2 rows between repeats. And also, I didn't pick up the edge stitch here so that it doesn't bind the openings as much. The ruffle is perfectly stable. It's not going anywhere. The texture is always going to sit up nicely on the surface of the fabric. And I think that the contrast between these 2 examples is why I find machine knitting so exciting, that you can change just one simple detail and end up with totally different effects. In addition to shaping seashell knops and ruffles by adding short rowing to the popcorn structure, I can also create effects like these 2 first cousins, the triangles and what I call a stegosaurus cable. It's a very raised cable that undulates either back and forth or all in one direction as it does on the sides of this swatch. So I'll show you how that's done, and we'll work out both of those examples. I'm going to hold everything to the left of the 6 needles I'll be using. knit one row across the bridge and the 6 needles, and then hold the bridge. And then I usually wrap right here just to prevent a gap at the beginning. So I'm going to knit across and then hold one needle every row. Until I've got just one needle left in the middle. Good idea to add some weight here. And then I'm going to knit 2 rows on that single needle, just so I've got a nice point at the middle, a nice tip to it all. And then I'm going to start returning one needle on the carriage side every row until my original 6 are back in work. And when I knit this 6th one, I will also knit the bridge to the end of the row. So what I've got is basically a little sock heel here, but for the triangle, what I'm going to do is lift up the first row just as I did with popcorns. So this is a lifted stitch variation. Try to get that first row. If you run amok, it won't really matter if you're within a row. So we've got a little triangular flap, or a triangular shaped popcorn, if you will, that's been formed here. And now I'm going to do almost the exact same thing to form the Stegosaurus cable. Once again, I'm going to hold everything to the left of the 6 needles I'll be using, knit across, and then hold the right bridge. So now I've got just 6 needles working. I'm going to knit across and hold one needle every row until once again I've got just one needle working. I'm going to knit 2 rows there and then start returning one needle on the carriage side every row until I've got all 6 of my needles working again. And when the 6th and last needle comes back into work, I'll also return the bridge and knit my way out. Once again, I've got a small sock heel, but rather than lifting the stitches as I did for the triangle, I'm going to take 2 3-prong tools and I'm going to cross the cable. The 3 on the right go to the left, the 3 on the left come over to the right. And then I'll continue knitting. And this time, instead of having a lifted triangle, I've got the beginning of a Stegosaurus cable.